Hi, my name is Evan Benson. I'm a certified fiber optic technician. I worked for the phone company for 15 years, and a year and a half ago I transferred to a large power utility here in the Seattle area. I just want to go over today about how to splice using the Corning CCH cassettes. It's a modular system. I find this a lot easier to use than the old systems that we had. It's a lot easier to rearrange and a lot cleaner install. So if you watch along, it's kind of a long video, but I think you'll learn a lot. If you have questions, please post them in the comments below. Thank you. Okay, you start prepping the cable by measuring off about 11 feet. You need about 10 feet, but the rest of it's just for, as you strip it out, it'll run into just the end you're going to want to cut off. You're not going to want to use the very last little bit of fiber. So you go to 11 feet. You don't have to be exact, just approximate. You don't want to put some tape around there just to mark it. And also we're using the Altos fast access cable. So most cables, you take the sheath off, the end of the sheath, and there'll be a little pull string in there, orange pull string. And you use that to zip the cable open, pull the sheath off. But the Altos fast access, the cable opens really nice. You start, well, tape it 11 feet, take and just score it around. And again, you don't have to be super exact, but you just take, and you can see it's gonna go quite far enough. But as you bend it, you'll be able to see the inside of the cable. You just gotta be careful you don't go too deep, because you can screw it up. But there, so see it's starting to open there. You can see the cable starting to open. Go back to the beginning, and you'll see on the cable, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little ridge there, and then on the far side, there's another little ridge there where the two halves come together. So for that, you just take your knife, score the cable along those seams. Oops. Flip it over, and the same on the other side here. Just grab some needle nose. It doesn't matter. You can use some pair of 9s, whatever you need to get a hold of that. And then this, you just start peeling it back. There it goes. You want just the outer sheath, none of this other crap in there. Take it and you just pull it, and you be careful when you pull it, it'll actually poke you in the face. So you just pull it back, and it's really easy. It's way easier than the zip cord. But you come back and you're coming up to your piece of tape here. As soon as you get there, you can see where you scored it. Let it pop right off of there. Back to the cable. Then you got all these strings here. So those, I haven't found a good way to get rid of those yet. You can sit and unwind them, or you can cut them, and they'll kind of sort of strip off. Okay. So you just keep going on these strings. It takes forever. This is the worst part of this whole job, is getting these strings off of here. Like I said, I still haven't found a good way to do the strings. Some of the cables, you can just kind of run your hand on it and it'll kind of bunch them all up, and that works okay. But you can end up with a big wad of this string, which is actually Kevlar, and it's difficult to cut and kind of hard on your scissors. So you just keep working at it, and it'll come off. If you get the strings off, you'll be taking this paper off. All right, once you get that outer string and then the paper off, you guessed it, there's more strings under here, and they go opposite of each other. So again, the easiest way to do it is You pick one that has, see this cable here, has a 24 count multi-mode, but it's the same cable as what they'd use for a 72. So you got all these black buffer tubes that are just solid. They're just they take up space to keep the cable round. And that way the manufacturer can use one device to make the same cable. So you just slip your knife under there, or scissors, or whatever you want to use. But again, these strings are actually kind of tough to get a hold of. But you want to stay away from your tubes that actually have your fibers in them, because you hit those and damage those, and you got problems. You got to start again. With fiber, anytime you're working with fiber, slack is your friend. You want to keep as much slack as you can without making a huge mess out of things. But things inevitably go wrong when you're working with this fiber, and bad things happen, and you have to start again. And to start again, you have to have length. You don't want to be the one that has to tell your boss that you need to do another splice outside your office because you screwed up. So this is where you can actually kind of get a hold of the fiber and push it. You'll see that it kind of bunches up, but as long as it stays loose, it'll push right off the end and just fall on the ground. This stuff's horrible. It sticks to everything. So you want to, that's the other thing with these, is you got to kind of manage your garbage so it doesn't turn into a big mess. So the other thing you're going to notice here is the cable's wound. It's wound this way and then this way. So if you go to these spots here, you can just unwind it. And that's just how they manufacture the cable. And your whole object is to get this the two tubes out here, and we're going to be cutting all of this off, including this strength member here. This is what gives rigidity to the cable. So you just keep unwinding until you get it all free. A lot of times as you're going, if you take the strength member and just lop it off, just to get it out of your way, and that'll help unwind these cables too. It just makes it a lot easier. And as you can see, there's even another string in here. So you get lots of fun with strings. One thing you want to be kind of careful of is these tubes. With that sheath off and unwound, they're starting to get to the point where they're delicate. So if you kink these, you can actually break the fibers in there, and then again, you're out of luck unless you got some slack. So just keep unwinding this till you get back to the start, you know, where it comes out of the sheath. Okay, so once you get all those, you know, blank buffer tubes off, the strength member off, that last string, you're left with your two buffer tubes of a fiber. Your blue group's your first 12, and then 13 through 24 in the orange tube there. We use a little bit of heat shrink to kind of finish it off there. We'll take and cut off a little bit, you know, 3 inches-ish. Again, it's just to hide that last little transition there. Like I said, the fiber, once it gets, you're down to the buffer tubes, you can kink it fairly easily. It's still pretty tough, but you want to make sure that you're sort of careful with it. But you just slide this up and over, and then you take a heat gun, and that'll just kind of make that look pretty. And just hides those tails hanging out of there. Again, doesn't have to be pretty. The more fibers you have, the more tubes you have, the better this looks. It just kind of shrinks in there a little bit better. It just kind of hides those tails. And then when we actually put this in a splice case, it'll come down with all your cables. It'll get zip tied. There's a little bracket on the side of the cabinet. And then you just bring this in. When we use a little bit of spiral wrap to kind of hide that too. Let me show you that. So this is the spiral wrap. When you're done, you'll take and just put this around it. That protects it and hides it. It just keeps it kind of looking pretty, and it does protect it just in case, you know, something should snag it or whatever, but just for that transition from outside your cabinet to inside. Okay, so we got everything stripped off. We got the heat shrink on there. We got our tubes all unwound from each other, so they're 2 separate buffer tubes now. You gotta be, again, like I said, careful with the spiral that's still here. They catch on each other, they catch on everything, and if you catch them and kink them, you'll break fibers. So what you do, this is the only critical measurement of this whole process, is you need to measure 42 inches from the cable end here down the buffer tubes. So 42 inches, that'll give you your slack that you need to wind it in and then up into your cassette. The 42 inches of slack comes from the end of the outer sheath, which allows you to bring the buffer tubes in and around and then up into the cassettes. And the table I'm using here is about 42 inches. So it's 42 inches from end to almost to the other end. So you get to where you got the 42 inches, just kind of pinch it. It's kind of a critical measurement, like I said. You got to be close, but it's not like to the thousandth of an inch or anything. So give or take an inch or so, you're okay. There's plenty of wiggle room there. I just put a little bit of marking pin there, and then that's our 42 inches. So that gives us our wind in there, so you can open the door in the back of the splice case and close it again without hurting anything. So we're ready to open up our box with our cassette in it. The other thing that's kind of handy too is if you tape your fiber down, it'll keep it from going around, moving around on you. It doesn't have to be, securely taped, but that just keeps it from moving. So we got our 42 inches here, approximately. So you get those out of our way. Okay, we open this up. A couple parts in here that you need. You don't need this. This is, of course, the directions. The cassettes come with everything you need. They come with the heat shrink protectors. They come with the fiber already installed. This one's a multi-mode cassette. You can tell that by the kind of cream-colored gray bulkheads. Single mode use blue. They're the same bulkheads. They're just different colors to indicate to somebody that you're using multi-mode versus single mode fiber. You open it up, pull your heat shrinks out. This is your fiber for your cassette, or excuse me, for your bulkhead there. So you got your fibers here. You can see the bulkhead, 1 at the top, 12 at the bottom. They come up to 24 ports with a 250 micron like we're using here today. You can use a 24 port. If you try and use 900 micron, like some of the bigger multi-mode fiber, it gets a little tight. You gotta be really, really careful with your slack when you measure it or you wind it in there. And they end up a little bit messy. You can do it, but if you don't have to, I'd recommend against it. But our bulkhead comes in the back. This here is what we call snakeskin. You can use this to wrap around your fiber. If we wanted to, we could have used it to cover up our tubes. We use it for the loose tube fiber. We'll use this in place of a buffer tube. We just cut it to length, put it over things and over the fibers, and it just keeps them nice and neat and corralled so they don't catch on anything, and it looks pretty. This stuff comes in handy for all sorts of different things. You can hide wires in it. It expands. It's kind of like a Chinese finger puzzle, so you can fit quite a few wires in there, and it just keeps them all bundled together and makes it look pretty. We won't be using that today. Inside our package here, this is a spacer. So if you use a 2U or a 3U panel, this goes in the middle, and then your cassettes slide in on these rails. These smaller ones here, these are for the 4U cabinets. You put them at the top and the bottom, and their guides, the splice cases, the cassettes have channels that slide in on these, so they just ride in on them. That keeps them located in there. So you don't want to lose those or throw them away. It's good to have some extras just in case they do get lost or you change a configuration. But so the cassette, you see here where it says 1 and 2. So you want your fiber coming up, because this is going to be on the top, and you want your fibers coming up into your cassette. So the fibers will come up and in. So once you've got your direction figured out, you get your 42 inches. Inside this package here, besides the heat shrink protectors, are also small zip ties. And we'll be using those also. Okay, So again, verify your direction, 1 and 2 on the top, fiber coming up into it. So it's going to come up and in. There's a little tab right here that you kind of want to mark, put your mark next to, and just pop a zip tie around that. And again, it needs to be pretty close to your mark, but it doesn't have to be 100%, just within an inch or so. Just otherwise you're going to end up with a bunch of slack where you don't want it and things will look crummy. And so just bring that up tight. Use your flush cut pliers. And then you're winding this in. It helps if you take this plastic cover off. It's got a couple of ears that stick down over this that'll keep you from winding this in. But this is where you can hide a bunch of slack. This is your oops fiber here. So if something bad happens to your splice, if you screw up, cut something too short, break something, kink the fiber, that is one thing you gotta watch here. You can see this fiber is pretty flexible, but some of the older fibers are not. And when you're winding it in here, it's really easy to kink it. A lot of times if you catch it early and you don't do a hard kink, you can just use some of that strength member that we had earlier. Just cut a little piece of that, shove it in there, and that'll give you a little extra strength, rigidity to keep that from kinking on you. So again, the slack is your friend. You just wind it in there. We usually go three times, and that's about perfect. So this is the only, I don't want to say tricky part, but when you come in, it just drops down, and you got to kind of wind it under the fiber coming in, and it just drops down, and that gets you on the correct side of your tray here. Okay, now we've got the cassette here. This is the preloaded cassette, so it already comes with the 12-port bulkhead in there, 12-port fiber is already laid into your tray. You know you came in correctly when your two fibers are coming in opposite sides. The whole key is to wind it around and they meet back in the middle right here. So the rest of your length here is bring it up, and you want to, about right here, you want to take your splitter, open up the buffer tube, and just snaps. You'll see it kind of snaps, just be real careful. And just slides right off of there. Once these fibers are bare fibers, they're really delicate, super easy to break them. Again, that's why you have your slack. See, if you just take the fiber, you bend it too much, it just snaps just right. Working with fiber, you want to make sure you wear safety glasses. Very important. If you get a little piece of fiber in your eye, it's glass. So it's almost impossible to see when it gets stuck in you. You can get fiber slivers that'll get in your fingers. They hurt, you can't see them, they're hard to get out. You pretty much have to live with it until they fester and work their way out. It's pretty miserable. But you use this little zip tie here to hold everything together. The buffer tube comes in, sits in this little channel, just pops right in there like that. Zip tie to hold it in place, just so it doesn't escape. And then just the flush cuts again. Okay, so your length, you want to bring your fiber around, tuck it in there. This will give you your length. You put it in your, so you want to bring it around 1.5 times. So it goes one full turn, comes back around, and then you just kind of want on the edge, so all your splices will end up here. So this is all excess here. So of our 11 feet, we've used it all, but the last little bit, remember those last 6 inches is where you kind of beat the heck out of it trying to get it open. So I just make sure that you're past or anything that you could have damaged. Cut that all off. There's your length. And then for your pre-made cassette, you don't have to wind it in. You can just match it up to the one that you already measured. Just line it up. And it's better be just a little bit short than long. And cut that off. You should have the two lengths should be pretty darn close to the same length. They'll all wind in there correctly. Okay, so our cassette here, it slides around the table. It's kind of hard to keep track of. So you just take some tape, put it backwards on your hand so the sticky side's out, and just make a loop or two here. And then you put your cassette down on top of that. And it's not super secure, it'll move around, or you can pull it off of there, but it keeps it just from drifting around. And then you also want to make another one, just the exact same sticky side out. And this is for all your fiber shards. So any of the pieces that you cut off, when you cleave it, stuff that just ends up here, you just use it just as a sticky side to pick up the little piece of fiber, and that keeps it from getting in your fingers. So we got our fiber here, one on each side. This is 250 micron. So I'll be setting the splicer up. We're using a Fitel S179 splicer here. Open it up. We'll need cleaver. And then here's our shoes to hold the fiber. Like I said, and you probably know, there's two different kinds of fiber, two different sizes of fiber. There's 250 microns, so you got 250 right and left. That's what we'll be using today. We also have 900. And you can have 900 on one side and 250 on the other, or 900 on both sides, or 250 on both sides. You have to make sure you use the right shoes. We take them out of our splicers for transport. We noticed that they were getting bounced around and we didn't want it to hurt anything. So these just sit in here. You put them in heel to toe. There's a little locating pin right there. It corresponds to a pin there. And left goes to the left side, right goes to the right side. So we got our fiber all laid out, one on each side, cleaver here, shoes. So this, you're putting the heat shrink, the shrinky dink on the fiber. This part you gotta be a little careful about, pushing it through the little hole. It's easy to jam it and break it. You got lots of length. That's one of the keys for all that slack that we wound in there, and then all this extra length. Is if something bad happens, you can take that slack out of there, pull it up into here and start again. If you're doing a big fiber like a 144 or 288, something like that, if you screw up one of these or to where there's no length left, you have to cut the cable back and start again with every single splice. But you put the shrinky dink on. Some guys put them all on at once. Some guys put them on a little bit at a time, one at a time. If you're doing 900 micron fiber, you want to make sure the shrinky dink, the heat shrink, goes on the side with the 900 micron fiber. It's kind of hard to see, but some of these actually have two holes in there. There's a big hole and a small hole, and you actually get the little fiber in the small hole, but your 900 won't go through, so you get a splice, and you won't actually be able to slide this all the way on. You put your fiber into your shoe. You want to take and spin it. It'll because it has kind of a natural bend to it, so you kind of roll it until it's straight out. You don't want it hanging off to the left. You don't want it hanging off to the right. You just want it pretty much straight out. Sticks out about an inch, inch and a quarter. Again, that's not a super critical measurement because we'll be cleaving it, which brings it to the correct length. So you just shut the lid. You want to make sure it lives in the grooves, that it sits in the grooves. You have these strippers here. These strip the cladding off. The actual fiber itself is pretty small. Multi-mode fiber, 62 microns, the inside where it actually carries the signal, and 250 on the outside. And that's, again, just more cladding to protect the fiber. You take and you kind of at an angle and just strip off the fiber, and you can see that there's our bare fiber right there. We do the same to the other side. And again, bring the fiber back, point it away from you. You can kind of see that, and then you can twist it as you pull it back. Flip that down. Take this, strip off the cladding. We got our fiber there. We need to have an alcohol wipe to clean the goop, the dirt and stuff off of here. Okay, we're using a Polywater Type FO alcohol wipe, just isopropyl alcohol. Just take that, and it's a towelette, but what we do is we leave it sticking out just a little bit, and you can see it just kind of folds open. So what you do, Now watch these fibers, they stick on everything. And when they stick, you can, like I said, you can break them, nick them, whatever. We just take this, pitch it in there, and wipe it off. And that takes all the dirt, chemicals, cleaners, everything off of there. Put it into your cleaver. So again, it's heel to toe. So you put it in, bring it in, and then slide it back. And actually it'll drop right in there. You'll see your fiber gets between this pad and this pad here. It needs to be between both pads. If you cut it too short, when the blade comes across, the fiber just moves out of the way and doesn't actually cleave it. It's a diamond blade. It's good for thousands of cuts. If you ever have to replace it, it's very expensive. So when you do this, there's kind of a technique to it. You don't want to go too fast or too slow. If you go too slow, it'll break the fiber. It'll not a clean cut anyway. Or if you go too fast, it'll shatter the fiber. So it's just kind of just like that, just firm. And you can see our little piece of fiber still stuck in there, and then this is to the correct length. So when we put this into our splicer, it just sits in there and it'll be almost to the electrodes there. And we just do the same thing to the other side. Clean our fiber. And the fiber optic cable, cleaning is your most important thing. If it's not clean, you won't get a good splice. You put those in there, and you'll be able to see here that we got the two shoes in there. The fiber's almost touching in the middle. We'll close it up, and you'll see the cameras here. Bring the fiber up, and we're on the correct program, multi-mode fiber. Hit start, and it does a little quick arc to clean the gunk off of there. It brings it up. It's got a camera, an X and Y camera to line it all up, and there's our arc. And it does an approximate dB loss, so we got a 0-0, which we call a goose eggs, which is a perfect splice. Multi-mode is really forgiving, it's easy to splice. You'll get goose eggs on almost every splice. If you don't get goose eggs, there's something wrong. When the fiber comes in and up in the camera, you see it, you want to take a quick look at that as the machine looks at it, but you want to look at it with your eyes also to make sure your cleave is clean, make sure it's straight, that the two ends are going to be, perpendicular, parallel to each other, I guess. That there's no jagged edges, that there's no dirt on there. If there's a little bit of dirt on there, that first arc, that little zzz that it did before it spliced, that'll clean off some of that. But I found that if you have dirt on there, it's best to stop the splice, just flip the lid open, it'll stop. Clean it, put it back in there, and go for it. A lot of times, if you try and burn through that dirt, it'll usually do it, but sometimes you get a crummy splice, and you just end up breaking it and starting all over again. So I find it's faster just to clean it right then and there. So you open the lid, you wait, it'll beep here in a second. That was a tension test, so what it does is it pulls the fibers apart and make sure you have a good splice there. You take and open your shoes, take your shrinky dink in and in, up to it, and then you can see here where the cladding, just as it goes into the shrinky dink, you can see you just want to get that centered. Put it in your oven, and there's a countdown timer, but it takes about 30 or 40 seconds for it to shrink that down. And then while it's doing that, you find your second fiber and just repeat the process. You do that 12 times for your splice. And once that's done baking, I'll show you how to wind that in there, but just same process again and again and again. It's really repetitive. It can get kind of tedious. It's good to have somebody you like to talk to or some good music. So right there is our splice that was letting us know that the heat shrink's done. So we'll open the oven, take it, and you just set it up there. It's really hot right now, and it's really pliable. If you try and wind it in there right now, we've actually had them break, the fibers break in there and ruin a perfectly good splice. So you just give that a second. So while you're working on this fiber, you're just letting that cool off. And by the time we get this thing, the second fiber in and ready to go, that'll be cooled off and ready to lay into the tray. You build up a rhythm. Everybody has their own methods, own procedures, but the key to speed is slack management, keeping everything kind of organized so nothing breaks. Your fingers with the alcohol get really slippery. These shoes will drop, they'll fall. We had a guy drop one, fell off the table and broke the fiber right as it came out of the buffer tube. We had to almost redo that entire splice. It was a really hard one to get because there was no length left. You can see here, there's a bunch of fiber that didn't fall into the tray like it's supposed to, sitting here. That's where our tape, our little piece of tape comes in. You just take that, and that gets that out of there. So now it's clean again. Lay that in there. And then, well, this one's getting ready to burn. You take and wind this in here. So to wind it into the tray, just wrap it in there. This is kind of the hard part. This is the artistic part. There's guys that are super good at this. I don't know how they do it as fast as they do, but as you wind it in there, that's why your length, where you measure the length of two sides together, is important. Because if it's too long, you end up with fiber sticking out. If it's too short, it doesn't quite lay in there quite right. And as you go down, they'll actually get a little bit longer. You can see we got a little bit of length here, which is good. And then this one, just gonna give it a twist, and it just drops right in there, and it just sits underneath all the ears. So again, you just do that again and again and again until you do all 12. Hey, thanks for taking the time to watch our video today. Hopefully you learned a lot. I think we went over it in pretty good detail. But I think you'll agree that the cassettes are the way to go when you're splicing fiber. A lot cleaner install, looks good when you're done. If you ever have to rearrange anything, it's definitely the system to use. So if you have any questions, please post them in the comments below, and I'll make sure I get back to you. Thank you very much.